Dungeons & Dragons Inspiration needs some work. That's definitely true in 2024, and it was even true back in 2014. Here are some options you can use to upgrade Inspiration for your Dungeons & Dragons game. First, let's talk about what Inspiration is. In 2024, Dungeons & Dragons changed it from Inspiration to Heroic Inspiration. That's all well and good. However, if you look at the rules for 2024, they don't really explain it. They've given us the player's handbook so far, they've given us the free rules, and they've given us the Dungeon Master's Guide. And what they say is, if you have Heroic Inspiration, you can use it to make a reroll. You must keep the new roll. If you already have Heroic Inspiration, you cannot gain it again. It is lost unless you give it to another player. Well, that's great. If you have Heroic Inspiration, you can use it and you can do something with it. Not the first omission we have noticed in the 2024 Player's Handbook, but it is pretty glaring. It tells us how we can spend Heroic Inspiration, but there's no mention of how to gain it. Since the game is supposed to be backwards compatible, let's take a look at the 2014 Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide, and what we find is Inspiration is a role-playing reward. And this doesn't mean doing a funny voice or getting really into character necessarily, but it does reward playing your character. And it is rather arbitrary. If you do something heroic, if you do something that relates to your bonds, if you take a negative consequence or overcome a flaw in your character, if you play into the concept of the game, the genre, maybe if you get everyone around the table cheering and clapping or laughing or in awe at a maneuver you pull off. The bottom line is, in Dungeons & Dragons, Inspiration is relatively up to the Dungeon Master. Now in 2024, there are some additional specific instances you can get Inspiration. That would include choosing a character with the species of human who starts with Heroic Inspiration. Also, the musician feat allows you to give a member of your party Heroic Inspiration. And I also believe that the champion can provide Heroic Inspiration to other characters. Basically, Inspiration allows you to make a reroll. You can only have 1 point of Inspiration at a time, and if you get any more than that, you either lose it or you pass it off to someone else. When you get it, how often you get it, that's up in the air. It's all going to be based on the table. This is a type of meta game currency. It's points you can spend within the game. It does take you out of the narrative and remind you that you're playing a game, but it is a role-playing game after all. So I've never had a problem with meta currency in games. You've got hit points, you've got spell points in other games. Having something like Inspiration, perfectly fine. Let's look at how some other games handle this metagame currency. Tales of the Valiant by Kobold Press offers 3 ways for characters to gain something that is similar to Inspiration. They do not call it Inspiration or Heroic Inspiration. They instead call this metagame currency luck. You can get luck once per turn by failing or missing on a roll. This seems like a great idea. Think about all those times that you've gone up to take a swing and you've waited for your turn and nothing happens. You miss, you whiff. Okay, well, at least here's a consolation prize. Here's a luck point. You can have up to 5 luck points at a time, and the first way mentioned is that you can get it if you miss or fail on a roll. It also allows those arbitrary rulings again. If you've got something that was clever in game or really heroic, or something that really just got the whole table going. Again, up to the Dungeon Master, or in this case, Game Master. And the third way it mentions awarding luck is for accomplishing a difficult feat or encounter. You might just get a luck point for that. Again, you can only have 5 luck points, but there are more ways to use it than simply re-rolling a die roll. You can spend 1 point of luck or a +1 to a given roll. So if you spend 2 points, you could add 2 points to your roll. If you roll a 13 and you think you're close and you spend 2 points of luck, you now have a 15. Another thing you can do is you can spend 3 luck points to simply re-roll. There is no clarification as to whether you are stuck with the new roll or you could choose which to go with, but in a game like Tales of the Valiant, it's pretty much going to be pass or fail. One thing that luck points cannot do is they cannot save you from a critical miss or a critical hit. Another thing to keep in mind is that you actually have to fail the roll before you get that luck point. You can't fail it, get the luck point, then hurry up and spend it toward increasing that roll or re-rolling that roll. In Pathfinder Second Edition, they don't have inspiration, they don't have heroic inspiration, they don't have luck, but they do have hero points. Hero points in Pathfinder Second Edition are, again, really more on the arbitrary side of things. You can have up to 3 of them, but they are awarded for in-game play, clever ideas, things along those lines. So again, it's up to the game master as to when you get your luck points. You can use hero points to do 2 things. 1, you can spend 1 hero point to re-roll. Re-roll, but you are stuck with that new re-roll and you cannot make another roll. It is actually given a type of roll here where it is called a fortune roll. And just like Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder 2nd Edition doesn't let you stack modifiers from the same source. So if you spend a hero point to make that fortune roll and something else might give you a fortune roll, you can't use it on the same roll. The other thing you could do is you could take all hero points to avoid your character dying. So you've got to have at least 1 hero point, but if you have 2 or 3, you're going to be spending all of them if your character is in the process of passing away. You would spend anywhere from 1 to 3 points. All the ones that you've got, you would lose the dying condition and stabilize the character. You would neither increase or decrease wound condition. So if you didn't have wound condition and you came back to stable, normally you would gain wound condition. You're not going to gain that here. If you already had wounded condition, you're not going to lose any of that by spending your hero points to stabilize your character. One caveat that Pathfinder 2nd Edition makes that I think the other systems probably could lean into a little bit more is that the spending of a heroic point or numerous heroic points should be described in a heroic manner. How are they reaching deep down to survive or to overcome all odds? That again is rather arbitrary and up to the table how that's going to play and what's going to pass muster for that, but it is a good suggestion. Another recommendation to look at for how they handle something like hero points or inspiration or luck would be Savage Worlds. Savage Worlds uses Bennies, short for benefits. And I really enjoyed when I played Savage Worlds because the flow of Bennies was, just like the game's supposed to be, fast, fun, and furious. We had a game master who would hand out Bennies often, but we needed to use them often. And there was no limit to how many bennies you could have in Savage Worlds, but chances are you were going to spend them frequently enough that it wasn't going to be an issue. In some games, we would store them up for that finale we knew was coming, and the results were amazing sometimes, hilarious other times. But bennies can be used a number of ways. In Savage Worlds, you can use bennies to do a number of things. One, you can re-roll a trait roll. So when you're trying to roll to attack or perform a skill, go ahead and spend a benny if you don't get what you want, and you can re-roll. Another way you could use it is you could use it to recover from their shaken, which would be something like recovering from wound or stabilizing. You could also use the benny to help absorb damage, soak damage, so you weren't taking so much damage when you were attacked. Bennies could also come in handy for directly impacting initiative, allowing you to draw another card. Their initiative system is based on cards, so if you pulled one, you didn't like it, you could pull another one and choose which one to roll. You could use it to re-roll damage. So we're seeing a theme, a lot of re-rolling options. You could also use it to regain power points, which could power anything from spells to mutant abilities to artifacts. Now, in Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder or Tales of the Valiant, without using a spell point optional rule, the translation of that could be regain some of your daily cast spells. Finally, you could use your bennies to influence the story. You couldn't contradict anything that had already happened or been described, but you could add an and then, right? You could make a modification to the story. That could be something pivotal, like a crumbling floor in a combat scene. That could be something like in a heist game. Maybe you had stored a weapon. You could kind of retroactively do that with a benny point and call upon it. Could be suddenly you have the item that you need to perform a given task. In Savage Worlds, the awarding of bennies throughout gameplay is arbitrary. The GM decides when to hand them out based on something cool happening, a setback, somebody's really playing into their character's hindrances or flaws. There are some base ways people get them where everyone gets a few to start out with. One key difference is even the game master ends up getting bennies, and they get bennies for their named bad guys. Not necessarily just the BBEG, but think lieutenant and above. So the GM would have bennies to spend as well. I think the addition of inspiration or hero points was a great idea for Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder to do. I think it allows for a little bit of variety, a little bit of an extra oomph to say for those oh darn moments. However, if you're going to be playing a 4-color superhero dungeon crawler like many of us do, I think looking at games more like Tales of the Valiant or Savage Worlds is going to be beneficial. You can look at this a lot of different ways, because also if you bring in something like the fantasy age RPG concept of stunts, these points could be used to fuel those. I think there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity for abuse. There's a lot of opportunity for shenanigans, but there's also an opportunity to do something new here. I think D&D Inspiration was a great addition, but I think it's really weak at the end of the day, and the loosey-goosiness of it, I know I, as a dungeon master, often forget to award them. My players forget to ask for them because we're just not used to it, and the point of, oh, I want that one reroll. It's not enough to interrupt the flow of the game. I think if you're dealing with something with a larger pool or no pool size limit, that the ability to get those going back and forth would become more common, but it would change the game. I don't know that it would fundamentally change it. It would definitely provide for a different gameplay experience. Those are my thoughts on it. What are yours? Till I see you again, remember to be well, be safe, and be awesome, both to yourself and one another.